Hello, everybody, and welcome to Behind the Camera. Here we are with episode 96 of Behind the Camera podcast. And as we were this close to episode 100, I've decided to shake things up just a little bit. Going forward, I'll be releasing 2 episodes per week, which means episode 100 is going to be out a lot sooner than originally anticipated. So make sure you keep an eye out for that. It's going to be a big one. But before we get into today's show, if you'd like to follow Behind the Camera across social media, you can find my link tree in the description. That'll take you to Instagram, TikTok, X, YouTube, and also it has the link where you can buy my book, Behind the Camera, The Journey So Far. This is available in both paperback and ebook, and is free to read if you have Kindle Unlimited. And if you want to see more of the behind the scenes side of the podcast, you can also support the show on Patreon. For £3 a month, you'll get access to extra content, including a Patreon exclusive series, your name added to the wall of patrons at the end of every episode of Behind the Camera, and much more. But now, getting into today's conversation. Today, I am joined by a very special guest who most recently served as an executive producer on Guy Ritchie's Young Sherlock, streaming now on Amazon Prime Video. And he's also worked on many other Amazon Studios projects, such as The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan, and The Man in the High Castle, just to name a few. We talk his career from starting out as an assistant to long-term work in feature film, and ultimately to his long tenure working in television at Amazon Studios. My guest today is Marc Resteghini. Marc, welcome to Behind the Camera podcast. It is an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. How are we doing today?
I'm great. Thank you. Thanks for having me, Andy.
Oh, my pleasure, my pleasure. So, Marc, you have a well-esteemed career in film and TV. Most recently, having worked on as an executive producer of Young Sherlock, and we will get to this as well. So, but first, can you just take us back into your journey of getting into film and TV from the start?
Yeah, sure. I would. It starts as a young child who watched entirely too much television and too many movies to the chagrin of my parents. Um, I let my father, when I was growing up, limited my brother and I to 30 minutes of television a day. And so I joke with him that I decided to go into the entertainment industry as payback. But for the early lean years when I was struggling in the business, I think the joke was on me. But um, I grew up in Massachusetts, in New England, and moved out to Los Angeles after college to work in the entertainment business. And I got a job as an assistant to a film producer at the Walt Disney Company. Had a couple of jobs as an assistant, and then worked for about 15 years in feature films. I worked with producer Denise DeNovi early in my career, and then I was an executive at 20th Century Fox back when there was a 20th Century Fox. And then I worked producing with Walter Parkson, Laurie McDonald, the original head of film at DreamWorks. And then from there, about 12 or 13 years ago, I transitioned over to television and joined Amazon Studios as an executive. And I spent about 9 years at Amazon Studios, and then transitioned into a producing deal with them about 3.5 years ago. That was a very quick recap.
No, of course, of course. But it always fascinates me because every time I speak to somebody who's worked in film and TV, like there's always a very similar beginning, and it's always the move to LA, and assistant jobs are a very, very kind of common theme with people in that industry. And is it a case where, you start as an assistant, but you have to make yourself willing and able to kind of take on any kind of job that, you can get your hands on whilst you're in that position? Or is it like a lot of perseverance to sort of progress up in the ranks of film and TV? Because it is can be a very unforgiving industry at times for people.
Yeah, I think on the bright side, it's gotten a little bit better than, I started in the late 90s, and I
Mhm.
had a pretty good experience with good bosses, but the 90s was notoriously, or even earlier, was notoriously difficult. Just a lot of big personalities, the tenor of the workplace not just in Hollywood, probably everywhere, but in Hollywood in
Yeah.
particular was a little bit borderline abusive
Oh
and
wow.
could be difficult. I think that's changed a lot, particularly in the last 10 years, probably. So in that respect, it's easier. I think what's challenging about the entertainment industry, as opposed to maybe more traditional career paths, is that there's not a set trajectory. There aren't rules of the road that if you do A and B, you get to C. So,
Yeah.
I would often say to young people, if you want to be a lawyer, you go to law school and then you get a job maybe at a corporate law firm, or you get a job as a clerk to a judge, and there's a kind of a clear career path. Or if you want to be a doctor, you go to med school and then you do your residency and you come out and you're a doctor. Like in entertainment, you can get a job as an assistant and toil as an assistant for a long time. Like a lot of it is based on chance and opportunity and being at the right place at the right time. So in that respect, it's still pretty difficult.
Yeah, of course. And for yourself then, going into like a producer role, um aside from anything else, like what was your path like that? Was that by choice, or was it more from experience and just sort of being exposed to the sort of field?
I when I was in college, I wanted to work in entertainment. I thought I wanted to be a writer, and you'll find that most executives or producers at some point wanted to be a writer. Um, and I applied for an internship in Los Angeles through the Television Academy, the organization that gives Emmy awards out. They do a
Mhm.
lot of other things, but most noted for Emmy awards. And they hosted interns in different categories of the business. So if you want to be an agent, you could have an internship at an agency. If you want to be a director, you could have an internship as a director. And I signed up for a category called development, and I had no idea what development was. I read the blurb, and it was like read scripts and books and work with writers. And I was like, well, that sounds interesting. So that was really my first experience, and that was my introduction to the business. And I learned that, I growing up with no connection to entertainment, I only knew the things that most people know about. There are actors and there's a director, and I guess there's a producer who puts the money together or something. But working at a company in development, I started to see, okay, there are executives and work in studios, there are producers who are on the ground, and that was really my first feel for it. And I was like, okay, I like this. I'm not a writer. I don't have that gift or that voice, but I really very much enjoy working with writers, and I enjoy helping to shepherd the creative process. So, and then that just gradually unfolded. I don't know, as I came out and I said, "Oh, I want to be this."
Yeah.
I knew what that first step was, and then the more exposure I got, the more I was able to kind of figure out what career path interested me.
Yeah, of course. And again, that's what I find so fascinating about film and TV. Like, I spoke to somebody recently who described their first day in a studio as a digital playground, and there was all these different things, and it was like, wow. And like you say, like it's not a linear path. Like I think people just can. I mean, another thing I've been told is that if you are there and somebody needs help with something, if you are the first person to go there, then you are immediately seen as helpful and can be trusted to kind of
Yes.
do all their different jobs. And I interviewed a man called Sean Tyler Foley a while ago, and he went from like he's done acting and he got into stunt work from literally just that because somebody needed a stunt person. He was just like, yeah, okay, I'll do it, and then that's kind of what he found was what he liked most. And I do find that incredibly fascinating. So obviously, then going through your career, you spent a lot of time in Amazon and produced, been a part of the production team and things like The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, Jack Ryan, Man in the High Castle, and obviously most recently, Young Sherlock. And what was it like, sort of working on these particular titles and leading into Young Sherlock as well?
Sure. So, I think I'm very lucky. To a degree, caught like lightning in a bottle. I started at Amazon Studios in 2014. We were probably less than 30 people.
Okay.
Um, the, the studio had filmed the pilot for Bosch and the pilot for Transparent, but neither had gone to series. So it was very early days. So I got to be there for what, what's referred to sometimes derisively, but as peak TV, like where there was this explosion of content that was being made, and streamers were really starting. I mean, Netflix was still in its early days,
Yeah.
and I felt that incredibly lucky that we got to make some really remarkable television series and work with some great filmmakers and creators at a time where uh, I think there was just a lot of risk taking in the business that maybe doesn't exist as quite as much now, right? Like everybody was trying to carve a space out for themselves. The streaming services were, and so there was a opportunity to sort of zig when everyone else was zagging, and to take chances on things. So, working on some of the shows that you mentioned, even on the most stressful days, I'd have to stop and step back and be like, wow, I'm so lucky that I get to do this. It's The Man in the High Castle is the first TV series I worked on. An amazing novel by Philip K. Dick. Ridley Scott is an executive producer. Frank Spotnitz created it. Uh, and it was to me, it was an incredibly powerful and special show, and it's actually getting a new life right now. Amazon just licensed it to Netflix, so it's appearing on Netflix for the first
Oh,
time.
grand.
And it was 4 seasons that was oddly prescient given what's going on in the United States and the world today. I think it's more relevant than ever. So that was a great first experience. And then going on to work with Amy Sherman Palladino and to buy and develop The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel with her, that like once in a career opportunity for a show like that for me. Um, just to be a part of that process and watch her and Dan bring that world to life was great. And so many others. I got to work with Barry Jenkins on the Underground Railroad, and you mentioned Jack Ryan with Carlton Cuse. Just some really, really special shows, and got to. I made a show early at Amazon. There's a creator right now who's has a very popular show on HBO called DTF St. Louis. The creator Steve Conrad, and 10, 12 years ago, I made a show with Steve called Patriot, which I don't know if you've seen it, but it's kind of this cult favorite that maybe didn't get the widest audience, but people in the know in the business, writers and actors, whenever I meet with them, they're like, "Oh my God, you commissioned Patriot! That's so exciting!" Which was a show that, like, candidly, I don't know as that show would get greenlit today, but in 20, whatever it was, 15, when we greenlit it, there was an opportunity. We made 2 seasons, and it's a remarkably special show and something I'm so proud of. So that part of my career was, I feel very blessed to have been able to be there in those early days.
Like, and those types of shows where when you have to have the caveat, I'm not sure if it would get greenlit today. There's an element of that where it's going to be good. It's going to be good.
Well, and the truth is, like, I think that I and we and the business in general, we made some mistakes. We made some shows that I think were probably too niche in their
Yeah.
appeal at budget levels that were too high. And so, in the last several years, I think there's been a course correction in the business where a couple of things happened at once. I think there was this sense of like, okay, you can't just overspend to grow your subscriber base. Eventually, you're probably going to, reach saturation. You have to engage customers, and like you actually have to look at a P&L and like run a business responsibly. And at that point, I think there was a realization like, okay, there was this arms race, and we sort of maybe overspent on some shows that shouldn't have been made at those price points. And unfortunately, I think the reaction across the business, it's not surprising, was to go completely in the opposite direction, which was like, okay, let's be much more safe. Let's do, shows from proven creators. Let's do them at a responsible budget level, things that feel more traditionally like television. And I think the long term path of the business is somewhere in between. And I think I'm optimistic that we're finding that new equilibrium now. I think you're starting to see, you look at a show like DTF St. Louis on HBO that's doing so well, and it's all of those things Patriot was. It has such a quirky voice from Steve, and but it's got amazing cast to it, and it's working. So I think it's about finding that right equilibrium now.
Definitely, definitely. And looking sort of from like the last 10 years, obviously with COVID in between, and you're getting more like Amazon original movies and things like that that are greenlit from Amazon themselves, like they've not been passed on to the particular studio to develop. Does that create more opportunity, like more work and opportunity for you to be a part of like new films and TV as well?
Yeah, I think it does, and I think I'm excited now as a producer with Amazon to dip my toe back in the water of feature films because
Mm-hmm.
that's the business that I came up in originally. And to a degree, I think there are a lot of challenges facing both television and movies right now. But I do think that the film industry has maybe come out of a little bit of its course correction, and there's a lot of different paths to make interesting things right now. As you alluded, that you can make movies that go direct to a streaming service like Amazon or Netflix. You can make movies for Amazon that go to theaters and then come to the streaming service. You can make movies for the traditional studios. You can make movies for indie companies like Neon and A24. And I look at some of the films that have come out in the last couple of years, and I find it pretty encouraging in terms of having the movie business maybe being a step ahead of finding what I refer to as that new equilibrium.
Yeah.
You look at just what Warner's did in the past year with One Battle and Sinners and Weapons, and really, they're big studio movies, but they're original. They're not
Yeah.
based on IP or comic books, and they did well, like commercially successful. So I think it's an exciting time. I think the next couple of years, despite all of the headwinds, and there are a lot of them, I think it's a exciting time, particularly in the movie business. And I think TV will catch up to it, hopefully quickly.
Definitely, yeah. And you mentioned films that are made like by Amazon go to the cinemas and then are on streaming platforms. And this day and age, you're kind of finding that there's less of a gap in time between that happening. Like it might do like a month to 6 weeks in cinema and then be straight onto the streaming platforms. And it, do you find that that's almost harmful for like the performance of the movies itself, movies and TV itself, or movies in this case, obviously, movies itself, or is the streaming aspect of it still very kind of like fruitful for movies today?
I think it's about finding that right window. And again, there's a little bit of a course correction happening right now. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like I just read, maybe it was Universal. I don't remember which studio was committing to like a slightly longer window than that they had been. And I think that there's this sense we went through a period in COVID and then coming out of COVID where it was like, oh, just put things directly on streaming or right after the
Yeah.
theater on streaming. And I think everybody's starting to realize, oh, wait a minute, like there's a value to having a movie in theaters for a period of time, having it feel special and exclusive, a little bit of a wait, maybe not as long a wait as it used to be. When I was a kid, it was like it was like a year before you'd get something on home
Same,
video
yeah. I
or
was gonna
something.
say it's about a year. My God.
So it doesn't have to be that long, but I think people are seeing that there's a value, and like, when something comes in theaters, it feels like an event. And if you can only see it in theaters and you want to be part of that cultural conversation in that moment, you have to go to the theaters to see it. But I think that's incumbent then on the movie business to make movies that people want to go see. Like I personally believe in that. People debate this endlessly. Like part of the problem is not necessarily that people don't want to go to the movies. Yes, there are a lot of other things vying for people's attention, but like we just started giving everybody the same kind of movie. Everything to me
Mm,
looked the same. And that worked until it stopped working. And then I
yeah.
think people were like, well, wait a minute, why am I going to go out and pay more to see a movie in theaters? Like we had to give them a reason. And I think that is the last year you saw that with some of the movies I mentioned. Like there was a reason to go see those movies. People wanted to see. I mean, look at Project Hail Mary that past 2 weekends. Like it's an amazing movie, and it's based on a book, but like or I would consider it an original, right? It's not
Hmm.
it's
Yeah.
not part of a franchise or a you know big comic book series or something. But people want to go see that, and so I think if we make great movies again, like there is an audience to see them.
Definitely, yeah. And like to me personally, I don't think you can't match that you've seen a movie in the cinema in theaters, you just can't match the atmosphere that comes with it, the big screen, the surround sound. Like unless you have a home cinema, not many people do. There's just it is unmatched to me, and I think a lot. Yeah, I have to say there's a lot more movies that are kind of getting made that are more enticing or to make more people want to go out and see them again rather than being like, I'll wait 2 months and it'll be on the streaming platform. Like it's then you find it's just not the same. Like it just really
It's
isn't the
not,
same.
and I think you're right. You can't match that experience. It was interesting. So I have one daughter. She's 12 years old. And my wife and I took our daughter to see Project Hail Mary, and she didn't really want to go to the movies. And the truth is, movie going has not been a part of her life as much as it
Mhm.
was for me as a kid. And I joked with her beforehand. I was like, because you don't have an attention span anymore. Like you're used to like short videos on YouTube, and sitting through like a 2.5 hour movie is a big deal. But like putting her in the theater, she didn't have a choice. There's no distractions, there's no phones. And part of what was so enjoyable to me about the experience was watching her reacting to the movie.
Yeah.
And um, in that theater, as you described, that dark space with other people who are all having kind of emotional responses. It's a communal experience, and I would see like awe on her face and fear, and she would grab my arm when something scary was happening to Ryan Gosling. And that to me is a movie making experience.
Oh, for
Like
sure.
we could have watched that same movie at home and she would not have had the same reactions. It's just different. That environment in your house, even as nice of a home theater as we might have, like it's not the same thing.
Mm. No, absolutely. And so when you like watch movies like in your downtime, movies that you've not had an involvement in, or even TV, do you see them in like a different way than like the casual viewer would? Because obviously you work in the industry, you know what goes into production. Like, do you see it from like a different angle than everybody else would?
To a degree, there's definitely things that I look at with maybe a more critical eye or from a
Hmm.
work perspective, like, oh, who's the composer who did this? I like this, or that's a really interesting shot. But I'll be honest, like I am surprised that I still am a fan first and foremost. Like I
Hmm.
can get lost in a good movie and think about um not think about how the sausage was made. I
Yeah,
mean, there were
yeah.
definitely parts of Project Hail Mary where I'm like, wow, how did they do this? Or I heard this was a puppet. Like, but those were passing thoughts. I'm not somebody who looks at and it disrupts my enjoyment of the film, or that I obsess about every scene about how it was constructed. I can still go in and shut that part of my brain off and just like enjoy the movie.
Yeah, that's healthy. I think when you work in that industry and being able to, like you say, still be a fan of it, that's like the ultimate balance. And you mentioned kind of in the future wanting to dip your toes back into feature film. So in terms of then the EP role, what would the difference be between working on a feature versus working on like a series?
Um, it's not uh it's not dramatically different. As so in television, I'm a non-writing executive producer, so I don't write. Which is the equivalent to a producer. The credits are a little bit reversed in feature film. So it's not dramatically different. I think the difference is maybe in terms of, apart from the format and like the length of, you have 8 episodes versus a 2 hour movie or something. The real difference is that in many ways television is really captained by the writer, the showrunner, us- usually the creator, not always. And movies are much more captained by a director, a filmmaker. So um, the producer's job differs in terms of kind of managing those pieces and who they're supporting and how they're supporting. Um, in movies, it would not be uncommon to have multiple writers working on a movie. Um, I like to limit that, but it would not be uncommon to have multiple writers, like one writer coming in, rewriting another, at the behest of the filmmaker. Whereas in television, that's really rare. Like you might have a writing staff, but you would rarely replace your showrunner or your creator. Like it happens, but like it's very uncommon in television. Like you're kind of betting on that writer and that writer's voice and vision, and that's what's going to carry you forward. So that aspect is different. So as a producer, you're kind of supporting a different leader, a different talent in that process.
So even in TV, like even though you can have like say like an 8 episode series of something, different directors for each episode, it all ultimately would come down to the showrunner then, who would be ultimately in charge.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So in the TV process of in the you'd have the showrunner who's really responsible for the singular vision and making sure that all 8 episodes telling a cohesive story, have a cohesive tone, cohesive visual look, which is just very different than a movie where it's, one movie and it's really the director who's driving that.
Hmm. Okay, interesting. And is your role like more on-set or offset, or is there like a fine mix of both?
It's a mix.
Hmm.
So I had partners who worked on Young Sherlock with me. And so I was maybe on set for Young Sherlock 4 months total, but give
Okay.
and take,
Hmm.
out of maybe a 9 month production or 8 month production. Um, a lot of the work is behind the scenes in terms of, right now I'm trying to figure out or launch what will be my next series, and so I have projects in development with Amazon, where that's purely working with writers and shaping a pilot script and a Bible that kind of lays out the season, and so that's all done, before you even start production. And then during the production process, some of it can be on set, some of it it's assembling the right team of people who are going to be there doing the day-to-day work. And it's different. Different projects will require, different levels of involvement.
Hmm. Okay, interesting. So then, as a producer, then with a TV show, and say you're waiting to be greenlit, or the talks are happening for like a future series, is there like a guarantee that you will be a part of that, or is it all down to like the sort of the needs and of the studio, or what your sort of current schedule might be? What does that ultimately come down to?
If it's something that as a producer, that you've originated or put the pieces
Hmm.
together, you'd have like I would have a contract that I would
Okay.
be guaranteed to be a part of that. Um, and different projects and different contracts have different levels of, are you exclusive? Are you not exclusive? Can you juggle multiple projects? And that just depends on a case by case basis and depends on the producer and the company. But yeah, what if you're part of building something, you would, once it goes, you would ostensibly be a part of that going forward.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense. I do just get very curious about the sort of ins and outs of it, just because as a casual viewer, you only ever see the end product.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to see how what everything goes into it. But yeah, so let's talk about Young Sherlock then. So Young Sherlock there just came out the start of March, and like it's been met with incredible reviews, and even broke the record for the most watched trailer in a 7 day period with 223 million views, which is fun. I'm sure you were delighted to hear that at the time. Like that's incredible. So what was that like working on that set, working on that show, or what? In fact, what was the initial call like to be like, okay, we want you to work on this show with Guy Ritchie?
It was awesome. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Guys. I'd met him maybe once before, but had never worked with him. Um, it was my first time working with Matthew Parkhill, who was our creator and showrunner. And so for me, first it's like, as I mentioned, I'm a fan. So, watching Guy direct was just fun and
Wow.
exciting, and a master class in filmmaking. He has such a signature style and voice and approach that it was a pleasure to be a part of that. Um, and it was a challenging show, but ultimately for all of the moving pieces, not a particularly difficult production.
Mhm.
I think challenging in that, okay, first and foremost, we are doing a new iteration of a character that has been done many times before. So, I think Sherlock may be the most adapted character in cinema and television.
Yeah, it could be.
Um, so there's a bar that you want to surpass, and you, I think, have to earn the right to be telling another version of Sherlock Holmes. So that was the first challenge, was like, why are we doing this show? You know, and for us it was, well, it's Guy Ritchie returning to a character that he did so well in two theatrical movies with Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah.
And that style and vision and for television is automatically something that I think is special. And then the second thing was, we're telling an origin story for this character that hadn't been done before. You know, there'd been the Amblin movie from the '80s, really is probably the most notable, Young Sherlock, but even there, he was kind of already formed
Yeah.
mentally as the detective. And so we really wanted to get into his psychology and his upbringing and like understand how this person was shaped. And you know, if we're lucky to have future seasons, that will be the journey. Like we will, our end point would be when he moves into those offices on Baker Street and takes his first official case. So that was the first challenge. And then there's all the challenges of doing a, you know, period spectacle show with action sequences and a big cast and, you know, multiple locations and all of those moving pieces that were challenging. But again, I think not, it was a pretty smooth production, all things considered.
Yeah, of course. And yeah, I can imagine, I can see the challenges in it being the fact that it's like, you know, a one of a kind origin story, but that means there's a lot more writing and creativity that kind of has to go into it. There's no real safety net in terms of, like, say, the existing lore of Sherlock
Right.
Holmes, for
Right.
example. You know, like, it's a completely blank, as well, to a degree it's a blank canvas. You got to really kind of, and would you be in charge of, like, sort of making sure, like, you got the right team for that in terms of, like, the writers and whatnot,
Yeah.
or yeah.
So again, I would say as an executive producer in television, it's very much I look at my job as, how do I support the vision of Guy Ritchie, our
Mm-hmm.
director, who's also an executive producer, and the vision of Matthew Parkhill, who's our creator and lead writer. So how do I support them to do the best version of the show? And how do I manage all of the pieces that a big production like that entails? So I would never say personally in charge. Like, I think of Guy and Matthew as in charge. Now, that may be that at times I may disagree with something that our showrunner wants to do, and you know, my job is to have a conversation and share my point of view and maybe steer things in a certain way, but it's never to kind of like overrule,
Yeah.
or it's really to support that vision, and then to figure out how to achieve the best creative version of that story at a budget level, and then, you know, also manage uh, our network, Amazon, who's paying for the show, and they want something out of it, right? And like making sure that they're happy, and that their instincts and feedback and concerns are heard and reflected in the show. So it's really in some ways a jack of all trades. You're kind of juggling all of these pieces, and at times one piece may require more effort and attention than another, and then another day or week it may be something else that requires more focus.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, knowing Guy Ritchie and his style of filmmaking, a very unique and quirky style, like, you know, you're watching a Guy Ritchie product when you know when it's on. Does that make it easier in terms of kind of, like, sort of, you know, helping find the right team, like, of writers, of everything else, just because you know what his work's like and what the
Yeah, to
vision
a
is like, almost?
degree.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, you want someone who can uh who understands that style, but also has their own point of view, and like, you know, within the constraints of that style can push and pull and maybe offer something new. Um, uh, and bring something to the table
Yeah.
that maybe feels unexpected, but still feels like it's a piece with what that approach is. Um, so yeah, I think in some ways it maybe is, I wouldn't say easier, but it's at least you have some sort of like signposts
Yeah.
or guardrails that you're like operating within. Sure.
Hmm. I suppose on the other side of that coin, it's sort of a lot more. There are probably the challenges either side, but on the other side, it probably just sort of there's already always going to be people there who are able to do the job. I'm sure, um, but in case of someone like Guy Ritchie, there's probably people who might have worked with him before. It's just like an easy kind of.
Well, and we definitely have, Guy has a great team that
Mhm.
generally works with him on all of his projects. So, we had his amazing long-term editor, James Herbert, who came on board and was involved in post-production on the show, and his music supervisor and his first ADs. So like there's a group of people who also help kind of support Guy's vision, and that allows for a continuity in terms of style.
Mhm.
On the other hand, I think there's the challenge of like people may expect something from that style and you want to deliver that, but you also don't want to just do the same thing. So
Yeah, of
like
course.
the opposite side of the coin is like there's expectations and like you wanna meet them, but you want to surpass them, and like so there's different challenges. There's other things that come up in that situation.
Mhm. Yeah, of course. And so, looking at then the difference between sort of film and TV for a second, you have your production and post production, of course, but with film, you obviously there's like a lot more. You have like sort of once the film's finished, there's then media cycles, film release, further media cycles, etc. What's that like with TV? Once it gets to post production, is it just on to the next project until this releases, or does it kind of go through like a similar cycle as like movies would?
I mean, it's similar in that like the post process is still the same. The difference is you're posting 8 episodes, so it's a
Mm-hmm.
lot more material, and you can't have an endless post process. So often you're posting early episodes while you're filming later
Yeah.
episodes. So there's a lot more balls in the air maybe that are happening. But then in terms of it, as a producer involvement in helping support marketing efforts and publicity efforts, that's all the same. And then simultaneously, you're thinking about and planning for success and a potential season two. So
Yeah.
almost as soon as even before we were probably finished shooting season one, we started having internal conversations amongst the production team of like, okay, what would a calendar look like for season two? Like when would we want to start the writing process? When would we theoretically want to start production? And I think part of the challenge for a series is you want to try to minimize or optimize that cadence between launches, right?
Yeah.
So and this is also really a challenge for a platform or a network like Amazon, which is you don't want to make your audience wait 3 years for another season. But if you're a network, you want to know that you have a successful show before you start spending money on a subsequent season. But
Yeah.
if you wait too long, you're going to end up having a long gap before you get to the next season. So there's always those conversations and discussions that are happening between the show and the platform. And when I was an executive at Amazon, I was on the other side of those. Now
Yeah.
now as a producer, I'm on the other side. So there is that dance. And then at the same time, as a producer, I'm still working on a slate of other development projects, trying to line up the next show for me that will go into production.
For sure. When you say that, the first show that comes to mind for me is The Boys, with the amount of gaps between the series of that show as well. But obviously, different reasons and stuff. But yeah, it's. I think with the series, it's the general formula is like sort of what, about a year between each season
Well, that's the
starting, really, isn't
ideal.
it?
And I
Yeah.
think I think as a show gets further along in its life cycle, if you have a very successful show and you're at season four, your audiences are more forgiving and you could have a longer gap,
Yeah.
right? Like you've built up a really strong fan base, and that fan base is going to return whether it's a year, 18
Oh, for
months, two
sure.
years, or longer. And that I think the first time we really saw that as an audience was probably back with The Sopranos on HBO, where
Mm.
it would take up as you got into those later seasons, there would be a pretty long gap as David Chase was working on scripts, but that had such a fervent audience, and HBO owned Sunday nights, and the show was so popular that the audiences gave it that freedom to do that. I think it's really challenging when you're where I am with Sherlock, where you're just launching a first season and you're starting to build a fan base, but maybe it's not to the level of The Boys season 3 or something. So you don't want to wait too long because if you wait too long, like, there's a lot of content out there. People will move on to other things, and in 3 years they might be like, "Oh, I kind of remember that show. I liked it, but it's been so long since I saw it." So
Yeah, these things, like, certainly in the eyes of the casual viewer, become like such a hindsight thing, because I know I've heard so many people say about different shows, like, "Oh, that show should have had an extra season, should have had this, that, and the other." It's like, well, did you tune into it at the time, or did you only just sort
right,
of, did
right,
you only just see it
exactly.
after this got cancelled,
Yeah.
So then, with Sherlock, then, like, obviously still sort of waiting to see if there's a season two or not. And do you think that, like, studios are a little bit more, not so much apprehensive, but willing to wait that little bit longer to see sort of how the first initial seasons do before greenlighting a second season? Because I've seen it before where there have been shows have had multiple seasons greenlit before the current season is even out. Like, is there like a sort of a bit of apprehension, or is it just a matter of seeing what the initial reaction is?
I think it's really a case by case.
Hmm.
As an observer now who's been outside the executive ranks for 3 years, and then from my time in the executive seat, I think it's really case by case. I would say in my very early days at Amazon, where it was a little bit more the Wild West, we had a tenant that was like, our default is 2 seasons. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we want to be very customer centric, and like, if we're going to put a show out for our customers, like, we want them to know that, like, if they get invested in it, that we're going to be a second season. I think that has changed across the business. The landscape is so competitive, and there's so many shows, and the costs are just so high that
Yeah.
probably becomes unfeasible. So I think what you see sometimes is like, maybe a show gets 2 season order because it's competitive in the landscape, and a studio or a showrunner is taking it out, and you have multiple networks that are bidding on it, and in order to win that series, somebody says, "I'll make a commitment to 2 seasons out of the gate." You might see that the first season comes together and it tested so well, and the network believes in it, or they have a need for it on their slate, that they might make an early decision to make a season two. But then some of that's going to be a budget trade-off. Like, I think if a show is more reasonably priced, it's less of a risk. It's less of an investment if you make that second season. If a show is, more expensive, then the network may want to wait to see how it performs, because that's a bigger financial investment to greenlight that second season. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know as there's any specific, like, one rule fits all, is,
Yeah.
I guess, I would
No,
look
of
at it.
course, of course. And but then with Amazon then producing their own shows, and then they obviously get like the sort of final say whether they do an extra season of any show, really. So there's like, that takes away the kind of bidding war from the networks. Does that kind of then give a bit more free reign and a bit more of an advantage for like Amazon Studios itself to be like, yeah, let's do it. Let's look at the numbers and kind of go from there, considering that it's all the other networks are kind of taken out of the equation.
Yeah, it does, and it really just comes down to the network. Now, if a show is owned by a third party studio, so for example, if Warner Brothers is the studio that owns a show and is producing it for Netflix,
Mm-hmm.
and Netflix decides not to make a second or a third season, Warner Brothers could theoretically take that show to another network and say, "Hey, we own the rights to this. Netflix isn't doing it. Do you want to do that?" It doesn't happen very often, but occasionally you'll see it. More often than not, you've seen it probably with Netflix picking up a show that, I think famously, like,
Yeah.
was made for Lifetime. I forget where the first season aired. The first season aired somewhere, and then they didn't move forward with it. Netflix picked it up, and it became a huge success. But that's usually if it's a third party studio that's doing it. If it's just financed by the network, they own it, so there is no shopping it to anywhere else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. And so then, having spent so much time in Amazon, then, like, has it been seen that like Netflix is like competition in terms of streaming? Then it's a matter of kind of obviously it all comes down to numbers, but like is Netflix seen as like direct competition and it's like a matter of kind of who can get ahead with particular original movies? Or I mean I probably could be looking way in too much into this and it could be further from the truth, but what's that sort of dynamic like? Because
I don't
casual
know.
viewer thing.
I don't know. I mean, so I've been outside the executive ranks for a while, so I can't speak to where they are now. But in general, I feel like it's there's competition maybe for specific projects,
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, we want this one, we don't want it to go here. But I think it's really about like what works for your service and what are the goals for your service. And I'm not so sure it's like, oh, we're competitive with this platform or this platform. It has to be sort of like, what's your business model and
Yeah.
and Amazon has a really interesting business model where it's really kind of like a hub too. Like you can go on Amazon and you can access Apple TV through Amazon. You can rent things from Amazon. So that's a business that's not really Netflix. Netflix is very much just its own
Yeah.
streaming service. So it's not really um a direct comparison. So I think that idea of competition is my senses is probably not quite like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's more about like what are our goals for the business and how are we going to achieve them. But there's certainly competition to land a specific show or a specific project that could happen. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Because I've noticed in the last like couple of years, there's definitely been like a lot of changes with Amazon Prime Video, like, and especially with Paramount Plus and Apple TV and a lot of other different sort of more network TV being sort of able to watch through Amazon
Yep.
Video as well. And that's something that Netflix just simply doesn't have. Like, it's
Right.
just, they obviously, but consider how they started and Amazon branched into it in comparison to starting out that way. So I suppose like it's like you say, different business models and how they've done it. But no, it is just really interesting, kind of looking at the two because they're, I mean, seen as the two like titans of streaming for movies these days. Like and but then like sure, like I say, a lot of like sort of like networks, terrestrial TV have streaming themselves now, but I don't think they're kind of at
Yeah.
the point of original shows or or films or anything just yet. Like, but no, I definitely I'm not just saying this, but I would be more on Amazon's side, especially for like that other those other little perks for sure. um, so yeah, yeah, still waiting for the green light for Sherlock, Young Sherlock season 2. Hopefully that does happen.
Well, I urge all of your listeners and viewers to go out and stream season one, show us your
Definitely,
support, and
definitely do.
we'd love to bring you season two and beyond.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, but in the meantime, what is the sort of what's in the pipeline for yourself? Like, what projects are you working on? What's to come so far?
I'm really excited. I'm developing it at Amazon an animated series based on a best-selling young adult book series called Wings of Fire by Tui T. Sutherland. It's this fantastic fantasy series with dragons as the principal characters, and the first arc of books, the first five books, tell the story of these five dragonettes, these young dragons who are prophesized to settle this big dragon war and bring peace to the land. And we're deep in development on that and doing some artwork and animation tests, and hopefully that's something that will move forward. I love the book series. There's I think 16 books in the main series and then
Wow.
some ancillary books as well. It's been around for about 12 years, but really excited about that. And then I have a medical show that's in development at Amazon. Um, and I have a movie that I'm doing with United Artists. That's a supernatural thriller. I'm fairly genre agnostic. I more
Yeah.
drawn toward character stories and voice and who the writer or filmmaker is going to be. Um, so yeah, my slate's not like huge. I tend to be pretty focused and really passionate about the things that I'm trying to get made. But always looking for new things and finding something that, as I mentioned earlier, I think zigs when other people are zagging. That's just a little bit different.
For sure, for sure. And that's an interesting point you make there about the genre. It's no one specific genre. It's more just kind of about the storytelling. Is that a common theme with executive producers, or would they be more kind of if they do one genre or maybe subgenres or something like of the same thing? Would they stick with that generally, or is it
I think it's
again case by
both.
case? Really?
I think it's both. I think there are some producers who really are agnostic and have built a slate and a resume of doing very different kinds of movies or television series.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think there are producers who really specialize in one thing.
Yeah.
I remember early in my career when I was an executive at Fox, I was a junior executive, and we were all sort of encouraged to like, well, pick your lane, choose your thing, what you're known for. And I was like, but I don't want to do that. Like, I like a lot of different things. Um, and I thankfully during my time as an executive at Amazon, I had the privilege of working on a lot of different kinds of genres, and by the time I had left, I was overseeing all of our television development. So I was working across comedy and animation and drama and unscripted, and so I got to do a lot of different things, and I liked that. I think probably my taste and track record is a little bit more heavy on the drama side, but even within that, it's very different kinds of genres that I've worked
Yeah.
on.
Oh, for sure. I think that's important because, like, to go back to an earlier theme we mentioned, like, I think something like that would sort of help you stay a fan, very much importantly, of movies and TV, and also I think it sort of emphasizes just that it's about the storytelling that goes into this like art form, and this is pure bias for me because I love storytelling, but yeah, I think that's kind of definitely one of the most important things. It's just the kind of the story that goes into it, how it's all made. Uh, the genre is a genre, but the story is what makes it. I think that's my take anyway.
No, I agree, and I would also add for me, it's always about that voice, and I'm attracted to a voice that's maybe 15 degrees left of center. So if you had I like to do things that are commercial and broadly appealing,
Mm-hmm.
but I try to avoid just the down the middle take. Like, I mean, why I love Project Hail Mary so much. I thought, it's a big sci-fi space story. We've certainly seen that before, but the tone and the humor that was part of that tone was so specific to Lord and Miller, the filmmakers. That's to me what
Mm-hmm.
really made it special. And doing Sherlock Holmes, it's the Guy Ritchie voice that makes
Yeah.
it just 15 degrees different from what it
Oh,
could be, right? Or
100%.
what.
Yeah, like when they have like when filmmakers and showrunners have just that little stamp of what it is
Yes.
that they do, then you just like I think it makes you know what you're in for when you're watching it, and like for better or worse, it's gotta be good regardless. I think
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think 100%. So just one last thing then before we wrap up, Mark, and so it might be a bit left field this question, but that's what I like about my job here. And so, what would your dream production be? And like this can be anything from working with a dream showrunner, director, genre, whatever it may be. Do you have anything in mind for this?
It's interesting, a lot of people have a list of like filmmakers that they would die to work with. Um, and there are certainly filmmakers that I'm big fans of, but I think for me, my favorite experience and the thing that excites me the most going forward is working with new voices and supporting uh voices that are just not as experienced. And I think for a couple of reasons, there's an exhilaration to sort of like discovering someone and giving them a shot.
Yeah.
Um, and then I think as a producer, uh, sometimes I'm just I don't want to say needed more because that makes it sound like a producer is not needed with an experienced director, but like the level the level of the type of impact that you have with a young voice or someone who's newer to the game is it to me it's just very rewarding. So, I worked with a creator several years ago at Amazon named Little Marvin, who I made a show called Them. It was a horror series, and um, it was his first production, and he was amazing, and he was such a raw talent, and helping support him and surround him with a team. And he's gone off, he's got another show that just got greenlit at Amazon right now called Bishop with Joel Kinnaman, and I'm so excited to see what he does with it. Like, I just think he's an incredible talent. And so to me it's about finding a new voice that's, again, 15 degrees different and surprising. And I don't think there's a particular genre necessarily. Again, like, I wouldn't want to limit myself with that.
I love that answer. Like, honestly, like, love it, because it's a philosophy that I fully believe in myself, in terms of, everybody having a voice, people needing the kind of platform to get that voice where they might not have it. So yeah, no, I completely love and support that. That is absolutely fantastic. Brilliant. Mark, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on Behind
Thanks,
the
Andy.
Camera
I enjoyed
podcast.
it.
Thank you so much for your time. It's been amazing having this conversation. And yeah, all the best for the future.
Thank you. This has been great. Really appreciate it.
And there you have it for episode 96 of Behind the Camera. Huge thank you to Marc Resteghini for an incredible conversation, sharing insight from his journey working across some of the biggest productions in television. Be sure to check out Young Sherlock, streaming now on Prime Video. Thank you as always to all patrons. Your support is truly appreciated. And as always, if you would like to stay connected with Behind the Camera, check out my link tree in the description for all socials and my book, Behind the Camera, The Journey So Far, which is out now. Thank you for listening, for all your support, and for being part of the journey. Until next time, take care, stay creative, and I'll see you soon. But until then, peace.